it's good to be here because Estonia is always on the cutting edge of everything, and you don't have the baggage of us old countries like Britain. But what I'm going to do is fairly quickly sort of talk about where the field of social innovation is, where it's going, and what I hope we might have is some conversation about what Estonia may do to shape the next stages of this field. I will argue we're talking probably about 40 or 50% of GDP here. I think some people get a complete misconception and think we're talking about maybe 2 or 3%. And I hope I will explain to you why that is very misleading thinking. But I'll probably throw out as many questions as answers. And I'm glad to be here hosted by Estonia Development Fund because, as Siim said, my current role running Nesta, which is a public endowment, we actually have a venture capital arm, in some ways more in your sort of space of investing in early stage companies, technology development, as well as social innovation. So what in a way we're talking about is, and I think the driving force for social innovation is some intractable problems like climate change, aging, waste, obesity, and so on, and trying to find better solutions. But in a way, the field is also turning to thinking about opportunity spaces. How in the intersection of new technologies and fields like aging, in fact, wholly new markets are coming into existence, often on the boundaries of a technology, service design, and needs. And so the drive has been from problems, but I think in some ways we're moving into a slightly different language as well. These are some of the things which we mean by social innovation. You can't read all of them at one go, but we're talking about lots of different things from technologies to ideas, some in the public sector, some in NGOs, some in the private sector. There's been a lot of debate about sort of definitions, which I will come on to. But first, probably the most important thing is why is this happening now? Why are these words, social innovation, appearing in government policies around the world, in corporate programs? Almost probably about half the world's top 50 companies will have something with social innovation in their words, which was not the case 5 years ago. Many of the world's biggest foundations are talking this language. Why is this happening? Very quickly, I think sort of 5 or 6 fairly obvious reasons. In Europe in particular, I think the fiscal crisis has greatly accelerated this. We know we have to generate more productivity in public services, and I'll say a little bit about that. I think civil society has become much more both important and confident. So European commissioners now talk about the 11 million jobs in the social economy. It's not seen so much as a peripheral sort of sector. It's part of wealth, jobs, etc. To me, though, the key is really summed up by this next point. This is from the US. In the US, the predictions of the size of healthcare in GDP is that it's currently about, in fact, 17% of GDP. Congress forecast that would rise to 25% by 2025 and half of GDP by 2082. Now, that is almost certainly wrong, but it is what is absolutely certain. In every country, the share of health will grow substantially over the next few years. Add to that, if you add, let's say, 10–15% for health, 8% for education, probably 2–4% for elder care, childcare. Even on these sort of core social industries, you quickly get to 30–40% of GDP. Add on green industries, and any plausible account of the future of the typical developed economy has the sort of space we're talking about here at probably roughly about half of GDP. Most business has not caught up with this fact at all, really, and governments are only beginning to understand it. And then the final thing I'd say is some very high-profile exemplars of social innovation around the world becoming more understood. So Grameen became famous when Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago, but in some ways other microcredit organizations like BRCA, if anything, even more impressive, creating entirely new business models around banking, universities, care. Pratham in India is an education organization with 18 million pupils. You know, there's a sense of scale and ambition in this sector, which again wasn't there 20 years ago. In Europe, the Mondragon cooperative family in Spain now employs about 100,000 people, operates in 50 countries. So what looks at first glance, again, like this sort of marginal field of small NGOs, is still often small NGOs, but also has a degree of scale and impact which is of a different order.